Outputting our coverage. It's what we do.
That's all we do every Thursday
At 5:30.
College football.
Mountain West Conference.
Doesn't matter.
SEC
Is all that matters.
Nick Saban
Is crazy.
Yeah.
And that's all. Let's start the show.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome into another exciting episode of Outputting Our Coverage. Coming to you one night later than usual, but that just gave us that much more time to think about all of the incredible things we're going to say in the next 45 minutes.
I'm excited about what I'm going to say. I'm not really sure yet.
Full disclosure, we really once football season is actually over and the games are over, we pretty much just make this up as we go.
Well, we're a little lost at this point.
That's good news for you. In this long drought, the blackness of the off season, you have to pay attention to recruiting. If we're lucky, maybe we'll get some conference realignment. There will probably be some guys getting arrested. Those are the things you have to look forward to over the next however many months. But first, there was a game on Monday.
There was.
It was a very important game, the BCS National Championship down in Miami. Supposedly a matchup for the ages between the Alabama Crimson Tide, the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, two storied programs, lots of history. This one did not really live up to the hype. Golden Domers, very disappointed after this one, but just a dominating performance.
It was, and we talked about it during the show. I made a case for Alabama, and I thought that they would. They really came out with the same kind of game plan I thought they would have. I thought it would be a lot closer because I honestly thought Notre Dame could make a couple stops early in the game. Not the case. This one just got out of hand quickly, and Alabama tried to slow the game down. I mean, they took it to the 2 or 3 second mark on every play clock. They just ran through the Notre Dame defense.
Yeah, it really seemed like a college team playing a high school team.
Right.
I mean, that's if you look at the stats in this one, the most telling to me, Alabama 265 rushing yards, Notre Dame 32. I mean, that's all you need to know here. That's a physical domination. 5.9 yards per attempt for Alabama, 1.7 for Notre Dame. I mean, that's disgusting. Manti Te'o, a total non-factor.
Right.
In fact, I think you could make an argument that his draft stock plummeted.
It definitely did. People were thinking that maybe there was even a chance that you could make an argument that Manti Te'o could be the number one pick in the draft. Nobody's saying that. I think he's definitely fallen out of the first 5.
Yeah, so certainly into the season for Alabama. People throwing around the word dynasty. I mean, it's hard to argue with that at this point. It's 3 out of the last 4. I don't know if that's unprecedented, but it's certainly a very impressive feat.
It is, and they have had a couple things go their way to get there in the last couple of years, but you need that. Any championship team, whether it be in the BCS or any other era, has needed a little bit of luck or a bounce to go their way. You can't really fault Alabama for that.
That's true. Although, you have to look at national championships with a loss maybe a little bit differently than undefeated ones. I don't know. I mean,
do you? I mean, you end up with the trophy at the end of the year.
That's true. But that all that aside, I think the question on my mind is, how did we get so? I don't know what the right word is, but how did we actually think Notre Dame had a chance? How did we get fooled into thinking that they deserved to be in this game?
Notre Dame looked odd all throughout the year. They play Pitt, they play Purdue, they really struggle. And you start to think, okay, the wheels are falling off. We're starting to see the real Notre Dame team. And then they play a team like Stanford, who we're pretty sure is a decent team at least, a pretty good team. They won the Rose Bowl. They're not pretty, but they're physical. They do some of the things that Alabama would like to do, and they handled them pretty well. They pushed them off the ball on offense, and they held their rushing attack pretty well on defense. So you think maybe a Stanford team does some of the things Alabama does. When they throw the ball around, maybe they're more like an Oklahoma who Notre Dame shut down. So it's really hard when you get to put together two teams like this who haven't played similar competition to figure out who they really are. But I think the biggest thing in this game was just preparation. Alabama looked 10 times more prepared to do what they were going to do than Notre Dame did. And to be honest with you, if Notre Dame looked at the tape, they could have told you what Alabama was going to do, but they physically just could not stop it.
Right. Well, I think that's something that Nick Saban has definitely proved at this point, is if you give him 30 or 40 days to prepare for a game, it's going to be very difficult to beat him.
Right.
He's very good at that.
I don't know how many coaching staffs, including the NFL staffs, that I would put against a Nick Saban coach team with that long to prepare.
Yeah,
maybe his predecessor up in New England might have a chance. He's a pretty good X's and O's guy, and Belichick, but I don't know who else out of that.
Yeah, so certainly a big disappointment for Notre Dame. We'll talk a little bit more later in the show about our way too early predictions for next year in the SEC, so we'll let you know kind of what we're thinking about Alabama's chances for next year along with everybody else. But really, let's talk about this real quick. Like we said, 3 out of the last 4 national championships for Alabama, with the Auburn one sandwiched there in between. The last 4 years, you've got the schools from the state of Alabama winning the national championship. Let's do a little exercise here. Let's try to rank those teams. Which one? Let's start at the bottom. Which one out of those 4 is the worst national champion, if you will? I mean, that's a kind of a stupid thing to say.
Right. We're comparing champions, and so when you look at that, you've kind of got to go through with a fine-tooth comb. I'd say with talent level, maybe with disappointments within the season, not the final goal, I would almost say this year's Alabama team might be the worst of the 4. And that's a really awkward thing to say, but I think that might be true. Their defense definitely showed signs of cracking and breaking during the season. They didn't seem to always have their head in the games, which is odd from a Nick Saban coach team, but they lost control. LSU had a chance to win. Georgia had a chance to win. Texas A&M beat them, so they were not dominant all the way throughout. So I think you could make a case for the Alabama team from this year.
It's close. To me, it's between this year's Alabama team and last year's, but I would probably put last year's team, the 2011 Alabama team, in this place, just because I think offensively this year Alabama had a much better game plan. A.J. McCarron was much further along in his development. I mean, we saw last year in the national championship game, A.J. kind of was starting to hit his stride.
Right.
But for a lot of the season, there were some growing pains there.
At the same time, defensively, though, this year, they're nothing like they were.
I think overall, this year's Alabama team is more balanced. And to me, that's more important. So
right.
I will say 2011 Alabama team in 4th place. What about 3rd place for you?
3rd place for me is the Auburn one. Had some holes on the defense. Really was not their strong suit. I mean, and it was accepted. They weren't trying to shut anybody out. They just knew they could score on offense. They were pretty explosive on offense, but they had times where they could be stopped. They got a little monotonous. They didn't really get the wheels going, but when they started scoring, it was explosive. So had a couple of holes in there. Made some interesting calls as far as time management is concerned. But, I mean, when you're looking at 4 championship teams, you're trying to nitpick little things. I would probably put Auburn there at 3rd.
Yeah, I mean, based on my earlier point, you can't put a team that lost a game ahead of an undefeated national champion. So I'm for my 3rd place, I'm going to go with this year's Alabama team. And then, of course, 2nd place for me, I think I'll put the Auburn team there. You got probably one of the best college football players in the last 15 or 20 years on that team. Like you said, there were a lot of holes on defense. Certainly, Auburn had to come back from behind in a lot of those games. Not a lot of dominating performances, but like you said, you win all your games. That's pretty important to me.
See, I don't put as much importance in that, and I guess that's why I'm going to put last year's Alabama team at number 2 for me, because outside of LSU, who really had a chance to beat Alabama last year? And nobody even was close. LSU beat them in overtime. It was a very defensive-minded game. It was a very tight game. Nobody took any chances. They blew it away in the national championship game. Outside of that, nobody really moved the ball on that defense. I'm really voting for defense here. They were just dominating for most of their time, even in the LSU game, only giving up a combined 9 points in 2 games. So I'm going to put the Alabama team from last year at number 2.
They didn't even win the conference, though. I mean, that's got to count for something.
I don't know.
I mean,
I don't think so.
It's tough to say.
They didn't win
but
an overtime 3-point loss in a field goal game.
It's still a loss, though. I mean, it still counts.
It does, but I do not put nearly as much weight in that as a 1-loss or a no-loss national championship. It doesn't mean as much to me.
Okay.
Trying to look at play on the field.
All right.
So that means we're unanimous in the number 1?
I think you got to put the 2009 Alabama team number 1. Just a superb level of talent on that team. And just for the most part, dominating performances. I mean, there are a couple close games. The Tennessee game comes to mind.
Right.
That was a close one there at the end. But for the most part, there weren't many teams that came close.
That's true.
In that one.
Just couldn't get it done.
Yep. So,
all right. So, do you want to do good call, bad call, our last one of the season?
Yeah, let's go ahead. Do a good call.
I'm going to let you
call.
do the good call.
Okay. The good call, if you watch the game, is very uncomfortable moments with Brent Musburger at the helm on the microphone. He's starting to reach the Harry Carey type levels
right.
of broadcasting. A little backstory on this one. A.J. McCarron is dating the reigning Miss America, I guess?
Miss Alabama. Miss Alabama, who is an Auburn grad.
She's an Auburn graduate. Her name is Catherine Webb. I've seen some pictures. Not nearly as good looking as either one of our wives, but
exactly.
that's just her fault. So Brent Musburger, however, is obsessed with this woman.
Most definitely. He calls her out, says, "Whoa, look, quarterbacks get all of the good-looking women's," even interrupts Kurt when he's trying to talk about her, and just keeps enamoring over her, and then finally tells all of the boys in Alabama to go get a football and start throwing in the backyard so that they can get women like this.
It's just truly uncomfortable television, but there is an element of truth to that.
Have you seen how many more Twitter followers she has now?
I think she went from 500 Twitter followers to 500 trillion in a day.
She has over 200,000 now. I think she started out with about 800. Now has over 200,000. So
that's insane. I mean, she's all right, but not worth that much of a fuss, right? I mean,
well, she's popular now. That's the big thing.
I guess, yeah. I did see today that she will be posing in the Sports Illustrated swimsuit issue.
Well, of course.
So, but she did also say that she is not like Kim Kardashian. She is the anti-Kim Kardashian, and
she said she didn't have a problem with anything Brett said.
She has morals, David. She said that she has morals because she's from Alabama, and darn it, people from Alabama, we got morals.
That's right. Is she a working girl?
I don't know what she doesn't have to work.
Well, she's obviously a farmer.
Why is she a farmer?
Well, didn't she graduate from Auburn?
Oh, that's funny. I think it's amusing that
I just think that's
the
hilarious.
Alabama people have to date the Auburn girls because the Alabama ones are too ugly.
This is true.
It's just funny to me a little bit.
We have not done this once on the show. I'm surprised it's taken this long.
I know. Well, it's tough to be an Auburn fan a little bit these days. I mean, with Alabama winning a third national championship in 4 years, I was in the car on a business trip yesterday and just listening to jocks on the radio and the Feinbaum show. I mean, it's
painful.
It's very painful
right.
these days. So, but it is what it is. I mean, you gotta give Alabama credit for what it's done on the field.
Let me help you share in the pain. The bad call to end the season is just perfect. Apparently, I did not pay enough attention while I was filling out my picks. I believe you figured out who I was picking last week during the show as we were talking about it. However, when I went to check after the picks have all been locked, I did not move my selection over for the very first pick. Therefore, I picked Notre Dame on accident last night, which dropped me from a tie with 8th, which is very respectable at 21-14. Max 2011, Charm City, and Larry.
Regular season champ, Max 2011. That's good company.
That would be good company. Yeah. However, I got dropped down to 11th at 20-15 with Ribeye, BT Perkins, and so close to you, but still just that one win above your 19-16. You were not in last though.
That's good.
John Mack 16-19. Auburn Josh, the winner of the Bowl Pick'em. Congratulations, Auburn Josh. Actually, a very fervent Twitter follower.
Absolutely.
So that's very appreciated.
See, that good things happen to you when you interact with us on the show.
That's what happens.
Karma.
Bama fan 1 is pretty consistent. I think he finished 3rd in our regular season. He finished 4th at 24-11. So overall, very good pick 'em. Only one person was under 500. I really think it had to do with our bowl show.
Absolutely. Well, it's tough to predict bowl season.
Definitely. Who's going to show up?
You don't know. I mean, it's not so much about who the better team is; it's who's motivated.
Right.
And sometimes it's not easy to figure that out. I mean, you thought a team like Florida would be motivated to be there. They've been kind of down the past couple of years, back in a BCS game, but they just come out completely flat.
Did you see the reports where 3 of the 4 players who were benched for not hustling have committed to the NFL draft?
Really?
Yeah. Apparently they were just kind of taking it easy so that they didn't get hurt right before the NFL Combine.
Well, I mean, depending on what team you get on in the NFL, you may not have to hustle either. Cause
this is true.
You're just playing for the lottery, right? Or
right.
Whatever they do in the NFL. They have a lottery?
They don't have the lottery. It's the worst gets the first pick.
Oh, so it's straight up then.
It's straight up.
So you really have incentive to just mail it in.
Right, and you had more incentive, like for Sam Bradford. He got $60 million, and then the next year they had the salary cap for rookies. Now I think the highest you can get is $22 million. However, you have it all guaranteed.
I mean, jeez, that sounds so awful.
Oh man, just $22
don't
million.
Understand how these people can get by. We don't understand how you could get by if you stop listening right now. We're going to take a quick commercial break, but we will be back on the other side. It's never too early to start talking about next season, which is exactly what we're going to do. I gave a brief preview of the relative fortunes we see coming for the SEC squads next year, so stick around. Outputting our coverage. We'll be right back.
It's time for SEC preview. SEC, Big 10, Big 12, 12 can't count. SEC, college football robber barons. SEC, yeah, they're big, they're fast, they're strong. And Missouri and Texas A&M as well. Yeah, SEC preview. Here we go.
All right, we are back here on Outputting Our Coverage. As we said, this season over, national champion has been crowned. But just like Nick Saban, we don't want to live in the past here. You know, you get 48 hours to celebrate, and then it's on to next season.
That's it.
That's
all
pretty
you
much
get.
What you got to do here. Next year, the 2013 SEC football schedule has been published. It's a little bit different than normal. Some interesting quirks happening this year. For instance, Auburn played Georgia at home this year, and they're going to play Georgia at home again next year. I'm not sure. Probably the same kind of thing applies for Alabama. There may be a team. Did they play Tennessee at home this year?
I think so.
So maybe Tennessee's at home again next year.
No, because all the Rocky Top fans ran out of the stadium.
That's
pretty
right.
early.
That's right. So some interesting quirks. The SEC has not said if this is kind of the way things are going to go permanently. Really, to make things work now that the 2 extra teams have been added, you'd need to go to an extra conference game, 9 games, but that's unlikely to happen at this point.
Yeah.
Just because I really doubt that as far as schedule toughness, it would be much harder for the SEC to compete with other conferences.
It would be. It just, you're pounding on each other that one extra week. We've got it kind of pulled up in a week-by-week view, just kind of see what weeks are going to be interesting. I really think the very first week of SEC play, it's typically just got a snoozer.
Right.
Pretty interesting game. You've got Vandy, who's very hot.
9 wins this year.
9 wins this year, won a bowl game.
It's the most in a while.
And then you've got Ole Miss.
Yeah, another team on the rise.
All in the same boat. A really kind of measuring stick week.
Well, we had the first week this year, I think, Vandy and South Carolina.
Right.
So
it was a very close game.
Close game. And at the time we thought, wow, this maybe Vandy's better than we thought. And then a couple weeks later, we were like, man, maybe we shouldn't have read so much into that. But now looking again at the end of the season, I think that game was actually a pretty good barometer. I mean, South Carolina ended up being a good team, and so did Vandy. So a close game there, not really all that surprising.
Speaking of the Gamecocks, they play in week 2. They play at Georgia. Another really good barometer game.
So keeping up Steve Spurrier's favorite tradition, playing Georgia early, because you can always count on Georgia have some key players suspended.
Which is a perfect strategy.
In Steve's own words.
Right.
So, that'll be an interesting week. Week 3, things really kind of start to get going. Alabama has to travel out to Texas A&M. That's going to be an excellent matchup.
Both of their first SEC games.
Yeah,
I just can't wait
nuts.
to that. Yeah.
I mean, you could pretty much assure that College Game Day is probably going to be there unless somehow Texas A&M or Alabama lose their first 2 games, which are probably against nobody. So I think that'll be a really, really big game. Johnny Manziel, second year. We'll see if he can kind of break the sophomore slump that sometimes you get with guys like that. We'll see if Alabama's got him figured out this time.
Well, he's lost all 3 of his main targets at wide receiver, and one of his big offensive tackles he went to the NFL. The other 3 graduated. So be interesting to see. They had a great recruiting class. Just see what kind of development that they get with their own staff. They're playing. The coaching staff there is playing with other people's players. It'll be interesting to see if they can continue to develop, kind of like an Alabama has.
Right. Plus, the offensive coordinator Cliff Kingsbury's gone now.
Texas Tech head coach.
Right. So we'll see if he was a big part of that success, or if it's more Kevin Sumlin really running the show there. So certainly a game to watch out for. Auburn opens up SEC play that week as well against a Mississippi State team that. Really a key year for Dan Mullen for
Definitely.
them. I mean,
they ended very disappointingly this year with a skid at the
I would
end.
not be surprised if Mississippi State doesn't win at least maybe 7 or 8 games next year for Mullen to be out.
Right. But isn't 7 or 8 safe for Mississippi State? I mean, that's just kind of what they've done the last couple of years.
That's true, but if you look at the rest of the West, it's pretty tough for Mississippi State to win 7 or 8 games
really
these days,
Yeah.
So what do we got?
Let's see, Vandy playing South Carolina that same week. That'll be another good barometer. Yeah. Let's see, you've got Ole Miss at Alabama September 28th, which should be pretty good. You've got LSU at Georgia. That'll be really interesting on the 28th. What else do you have here? Alabama at Kentucky. That's always a very interesting game.
Yeah.
I'm saying that sarcastically. Kentucky, do you see them being any better this year? We haven't really talked about Kentucky.
I mean, Mark Stoops coming in, it's going to be a rebuilding project. That one's going to take a while.
Let's look at
that one around.
Let's look the same week, South Carolina at Arkansas. Do you think that Bielema can get anything going at Arkansas in a year?
No. I mean, we've talked about this before. A very puzzling hire to me. The type of players to run a Bielema physical offense are not at Arkansas right now.
Right.
It's going to take a couple of years to get them, if at all. I'm not sure that they can get those type of guys. So, I mean, you take a Steve Spurrier coach team that has just improved each year, has really gotten far above what South Carolina has been historically. Of course, they lose.
They lose Lattimore.
Are we allowed to say his name now?
We can say his name now because he's recovering.
He's recovering. All right, so Lattimore is gone.
Also, when I think of Lattimore, I don't know what the recognition is, but when I thought of Lattimore before, it was the event not to be named. However, now, anytime I think Lattimore, it goes right to South Carolina, which goes immediately to the Clowney hit.
Yes.
And so that's acceptable.
So, of course, you got Clowney on that team. The thing that worries me is you got to find a way to replace Lattimore. There's not really a key guy there right now that we know of that can come in and kind of balance out that offense, because we know how Steve Spurrier is with his quarterbacks, very quick on the trigger, pulling those guys. To survive as a Steve Spurrier quarterback, you need a running game as well to kind of take some pressure off those guys, let them get comfortable.
He seems to be okay swapping the two back. He seems to have two pretty good quarterbacks. Do you think that they could open it up a little bit more this year like they did in the bowl game, at the end of the bowl game?
They might have to. They might have to go back to more of a Steve Spurrier fun and gun type offense.
That's true.
If they don't have the running threat, I don't know. It'll be interesting to watch. I think South Carolina, a team that may be a little bit in transition next year, but still above what Arkansas is going to be capable of.
Okay, well, we've got Florida at LSU in October the 12th. How do you think Florida rebounds from this bowl loss?
It's a real interesting year for Florida next year. They're getting to the point now, I think this will be Muschamp's
third year.
Third year? Yeah, they're getting to the point where it's time for some results. And the Blue Chippers are there, especially on defense, but still a quarterback has got to emerge for them. Jacoby Brissett is going to transfer, so he's gone. You got Jeff Driscoll now. Unless you're bringing in a new guy, maybe a JUCO or something, I'm still not sold on Jeff Driscoll being a franchise-type guy.
I'm not either. He doesn't have the head for the game. Kind of like Chandler at Arkansas. He makes too many bad decisions.
Right.
Just never really can make the right decision when it counts. They do have somebody coming in. Unfortunately for them, it's in 2 years. They've got a quarterback at Florida who threw for 10 touchdowns in one game. I think we talked about him on air before, but they're going to have to wait a little while for him, so hopefully they can get something going. What about LSU? They come back strong next year?
LSU, I think they're going to take a little bit of a drop next year. You saw all the guys they have. I mean, like half of their starting lineup declared for the NFL draft.
And most of their defensive starters.
Yeah, the loss. It's dangerous to read too much into bowl results. We say that all the time, but it just seems like there's something going on at LSU, maybe even continuing back to the BCS championship from last year. It seemed like there had to be something strange going on for a team to come in and just be that unprepared, something to do with the coaching. I mean, we saw more bad coaching moves by Les Miles in the Chick-fil-A Bowl.
Yeah.
At some point, I think they're going to stumble a little bit, and I think next year may be the year for that.
If they stumble next year, you think Les Miles is out?
I don't know. He has at least next year he'll be safe.
Let me ask this question differently. Do you think Les Miles leaves? Do you think he's done what he can do at LSU? He needs to find a new atmosphere?
I think what Les Miles needs to do is find a quarterback.
That's a good point.
Much like Florida, that's pretty much all the LSU teams have been missing for the past few years is superior quarterback play.
Right.
I mean, LSU has the recruits. They lost a lot of guys, sure. It's going to be some growing pains for the guys that are replacing them, but in the end, they're every bit as talented as the guys who are leaving. What LSU is missing is that the balance of the superior quarterback play. And if they can get that, they'll be dangerous again, but I don't see that changing anytime soon.
No. Okay, so November 9th, we've come to expect it. It's become, I really think it's probably one of the premier rivalries when we talk about competition in the SEC right now. We've talked about how we feel about LSU. Do you think there's still the hype for the LSU-Alabama game if both teams come in undefeated for this one?
Yeah, if they come in undefeated, but I really think LSU might have a loss before that point, especially to Georgia.
Right.
So I think the hype for that game is probably going to be less than it's been the past couple of years.
So what about Alabama? They're losing. It came out today. They are losing Milliner. They're losing Fluker, and they're losing Lacey now.
Right. In addition to quite a bit of their offensive line.
Quite a bit of their offensive line who graduates out, 3 of the 5. So what do you think about Alabama next year?
Well, I think the defense will be better. Defense is pretty young.
Definitely.
But offensively, it's going to be interesting to see what happens with the rushing game.
Right.
Yeldon, obviously a big talent, but they got to find another guy to kind of be the number 2 guy after him.
You do.
And you have some options there.
Definitely have some options.
You got Jalston Fowler, who's hurt this year.
D.
You
Hart.
got D. Hart. I don't know if D. Hart is necessarily an Eddie Lacy type guy who can really get in there. He's more of a situational guy.
He's more of a Iranian Demps from Florida. You
Right.
also have a Florida running back who set the Florida all-time rushing record this year, coming in this year for Alabama.
Yeah.
So.
And freshman running backs can pretty easily make an impact. With contrast to some other positions, it's a lot tougher to come do that.
And they can do it at Alabama because they run a stable. They don't just run one back.
Right.
And really, they were restricted to only running 2 backs this year. Saban and that offense typically likes to run at least 3.
Right. So, but to me, the offensive line is a big question mark. I mean, there are talented guys behind them, but
can they make the push?
Experience is a big deal.
It is
on the offensive line, and there's only one way to get it, and that's by playing. And,
that's right.
And the downside of having such a great offensive line is that your other guys don't get to play.
Right.
So it'd be interesting to see that. That's the thing that I'm looking at next year. It's kind of tough to predict wins and losses at this point. Somebody else is going to have to step up and challenge Alabama. I think the easiest case to make at this point is probably Texas A&M. A lot of people are going to say that's going to be a tough one. Does Alabama have to play Georgia next year in the regular season?
I'll go back and find it, but go ahead and tell me what you think about Georgia. We haven't talked about them yet.
Georgia, I think that's a team to watch. I mean, I think they're going to lose some stuff on defense. Bakari Rambo, I think he's a senior. He'll be gone. John Jenkins, I think is his name, the nose tackle.
Yes.
I believe he'll be gone as well.
They do not have to play Georgia in the regular season.
Jarvis Jones, I think he'll be gone as well.
I think he's out.
So they're losing some stuff on defense, but Aaron Murray's coming back.
He is. They've got 2 really young, really talented running backs.
Right. So
do you think Georgia could be a competitor? I mean,
I
they
think
took
Georgia,
a step this year.
They could easily be a competitor. They play in the East. had a pretty easy road to the championship game this year, to both championship games almost.
Right.
So I think Georgia's easily the favorite in the East for me next year.
I agree with
Easily.
you. All right, the last team we'll talk about, I really want your opinion on it. What's Auburn look like next year? Do they get it turned around?
They'll be better than they were. I think 7 or 8 wins is not unrealistic.
I don't think so.
Any more than that, maybe stretching it.
I would say 6 to 8 is probably your window.
I think just a change in culture alone is going to get you far above what you were this year. The good news short term is that a lot of the players on offense that are there were recruited for Gus Malzahn's system, so they're already in place, ready to go. The biggest question, just like with a bunch of other teams, is quarterback.
Right.
Kyle Frazier will kind of get another chance here since he grew up playing the Gus Malzahn offense, went to a high school where Gus Malzahn was a former coach, so he's got a real good chance to step up here, but I wouldn't sleep on Jonathan Wallace either. I mean,
right.
That guy came in at the end of the season, showed some real poise as a true freshman. So
throws a really good ball, too.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see. Defensively, I think Auburn will be a little bit better, probably not a whole lot better, but I think Ellis Johnson coming in with a new scheme can't be any worse than what they've been doing the past couple of years. I mean, it didn't matter who the defensive coordinator was the past years that Chiswick was there. It was Chiswick's style of play on defense. So we're going to see something a little bit different this year with the 4-2-5 out of Ellis Johnson. But I don't think Auburn is up to the level where they can, realistically compete day in and day out with Alabama, Texas A&M,
right.
and Georgia. Although, on a given day, there's always a chance to upset a team like that, but I think you'll see Auburn 7 or 8 wins next year.
2 final questions when we'll wrap up Auburn. Do you think that the 4-2-5 can work in the SEC with a strong middle running game?
I think it'd be interesting to see. I mean, I understand the idea behind it is with the proliferation of spread offenses now, you don't have as much chance to substitute. So the idea is that the fifth defensive back is kind of a hybrid, a linebacker, safety.
Nickel linebacker.
Right, so he kind of helps you out either way. Now, we all know that when you compromise, you don't get what you want really on either side.
Exactly.
So you're taking a little bit of a hit there. I don't know. It really depends on the defensive line play for Auburn. That was very disappointing this year. Lots of supposedly talented guys did not live up to their potential. If you can get those guys to play where they should be, some of these JUCO guys that are coming in, the 4-2-5 will work for you. But if your defensive line can't handle it, you're going to be getting gashed.
Exactly. All right, and one final question with Auburn. Where do you see Auburn in 2 or 3 years?
It's really tough to predict that without seeing what happens this year.
It is.
I mean, you'd like to say that 2 or 3 years with at least the staff that Malzahn has put together, some top-notch recruiters.
Exactly.
You'd like to think that Auburn's going to get some blue-chip talent in there and maybe actually have a chance to coach them up this time. So I think getting players is not going to be a problem for Auburn. It'll just be interesting to see how the schematic differences. I mean, Auburn going in a totally different direction than Alabama and LSU.
Right.
It may pay off. It may not. It's a big gamble.
It paid off 1 year.
Yeah,
so I really think that the difference you're going to see is not in the scheme. It won't even be in the recruits you're getting. It'll be in how they're being processed, how they come up in the system. If you look at Alabama, they get a lot of 3-star athletes. They get a lot of 4-star athletes. They do get some 5-star recruits, but they're conditioned, they're worked out, they're stronger than when they got there, they're better football players when they got there. I think Auburn has the chance to do that with a lot of the, not only recruiters, but the developers that they brought in as coaches. I'm kind of excited to see what they do on defense because they've got some really talented motivators and teachers on that side of the ball. So I really think in the next 2 or 3 years, Auburn could be a force just because they're going to start developing players, which is what they've lacked so badly in the last year or two.
It's just a crazy scenario in the SEC West. I mean, I envision a thing where, Alabama, Auburn, LSU, Arkansas, Texas A&M. I mean, those schools have really committed a lot of resources to this now. You may get to a point where they're just, the SEC West in general is just far and above better than most of the other teams in college football. And
what happens when they all beat each other twice?
I mean, you just kind of reach a critical mass, where it becomes like a Cold War and nobody can really win at that point. So,
well, with the 4-team playoff, I think will help a little.
I think it will too, and eliminating the rules with the BCS games to where a conference can only have 2 participants.
Right.
I think that's going to help a lot.
I do.
So it'd be interesting to watch. I mean, there's going to be some really, really competitive SEC action happening in the next few years, and really the SEC should probably just secede as a conference. I mean, there's no reason to keep playing these championship games when you just win every time.
They're a foregone conclusion.
Yeah.
So we promised this to our fans. You want to take a break before we do this?
Yeah, we're going to talk about a little bit of SEC basketball now as the season rolls onward. SEC matchups started this week, basically. So if you're like us, you don't really know much about the SEC basketball happenings at this point. We're going to give you a little primer on the other side so you can start getting interested in that now that football's over. Give you something to rib your coworkers about, some actual games going on. So
you can sound smarter than they do.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll do that here on the other side of Outputting Our Coverage.
We're back, don't know what we're talking about. 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 We're back, here we go, no more commercials. Here we go, always talking stuffs. We're back, don't know what we're talking about, but we're back. Sweet. Time for the show. We're back, here we go.
All right, we are back.
You know what just ran through my head? One of these shows, we're just going to have to do our intro and our in-between songs live. I think that would really give our fans something.
Yeah.
Instead of playing the recordings, we're just going to sing them live.
How about next week? We'll do that.
Maybe not next week, but we'll surprise them with it.
All right, it'll be interesting. You feel like you have a voyeuristic window into
the creative process. Let's just stop there.
I just had weird thoughts in my head about somebody watching me while I'm taking a shower.
Right. Yeah.
That's not what you want to hear.
So.
All right. Speaking of watching people while they're taking a shower, SEC basketball.
Exactly. Right.
Yes.
I think that counts as our offensive comment of the week. We haven't made one yet.
I think it does.
So.
We made it happen.
Andy, how much SEC basketball have you watched this year?
I haven't actually watched any. I've followed the Auburn games a little bit, just like via Twitter,
right?
Things of that nature. I'm probably going to try to go to at least one game.
Do you know where the SEC basketball championship is being held this year?
I would guess Atlanta, but I'm thinking that's probably wrong.
Right. It's always held in Atlanta. It's held in Nashville this year, so it's only a short 2-hour drive up north.
Maybe we'll try to go check that out.
As long as it's not $180, but
yes, we'll see how that one goes. All right, so 14 teams in the SEC.
All in one conference.
For basketball, no divisions.
Right.
Everybody's all lumped together. I think the way it works at the end of the season, maybe like the top 8 or 10 teams get into the tournament.
I think it's 8.
Like
I think you're right.
So a little bit different than football. Most people think SEC basketball, they're like, oh, Kentucky. Kentucky's got to be the best team. Is that the case this year, Dave?
That is not the case this year. Kentucky 10-4, kind of in the middle of the pack in the standings right now. Really disappointing. We're always expecting Kentucky, especially now with Calipari, to just be able to recruit those freshmen and be able to get them to gel immediately. Not the case. They're really having a hard time coming together. Just had a very narrow win against a Vanderbilt team, 60-58. Typically, that would be pretty impressive. However, this year, Vandy, as we'll talk about later, is not the Vandy they used to be. Losses to Louisville, Baylor, Notre Dame, and Duke. Only Duke and Louisville were ranked at the time when they played them. Just really not an impressive season. They haven't played anybody outside of that. So Kentucky maybe not as strong as they are or are in previous years. Missouri really looks to be the cream of the crop right now.
That's why we brought Missouri in.
That's right.
Basketball integrity. So.
Basketball integrity, because they didn't generate a whole lot with the football. Texas A&M was kind of the good call on football, bringing them in. Missouri, it looks like, is going to be carrying the basketball. They're 12-2 right now, 1-0 in conference play. Just had a pretty I wouldn't say dominant, but a pretty strong win against Alabama in their first SEC game. So look for them. Ole Miss is 12-2 right now, 1-0 in conference play, although they haven't really played anybody. So not really sure who they are. Florida had really close losses, one against Arizona. It's fading from me who they lost to again, but they've been pretty solid all season. They're also going to be strong. Texas A&M, 11-3 is also pretty good. But I like to talk about the bad.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of bad to talk about.
A lot of bad to talk about. Although, you know what? Who's right underneath Kentucky in the conference standings?
Surprisingly,
right now?
Auburn.
It's Auburn.
Picked up an SEC win to open their SEC play for the first time in like 7 or 8 years against LSU this week. So,
and that brought them to 7-7.
Yeah,
so impressive.
They've had some growing pains this year. A lot of young players, as it seemed to have been every year. But I think overall the talent level is increasing for them, which
Definitely.
is good.
I think the overall bad that we all expect is the Georgia. The other loss for Florida, by the way, being Kansas State. So you kind of expect that. Georgia, bad. They're always bad. Not really that interesting. Tennessee is bad, but they're also on probation, going through new coaching. Arkansas is not that good, but they've struggled for the last really 5 or 6 years. LSU is 0-1, as you mentioned, 9-3 overall, but just now getting in the conference. The one team really that we're not used to seeing down here is Vandy. Vandy is at 6-7 and 0-1 in conference play and have not looked very good. Have you seen any of their games?
I have not seen any of them. I did see that Vanderbilt almost beat Kentucky.
They did.
This
it
week.
Was
a
2-point game.
Like you said, that probably doesn't mean as much as in normal years. But I guess Vandy finding out that you can only be good at one sport.
Right. And
decent at one
let's
sport.
kind of take a look at their schedule. They beat Nicholls State. Okay. They lost to Oregon, which Oregon beat an previously undefeated Arizona last night. Looked kind of impressive. However, they lost 74-48. Oregon
rough.
Beat them pretty badly.
That's kind of a beatdown.
That is a
basketball.
beatdown. They lost to Davidson. I think the worst one, though, they lost to Marist. Had you ever heard of Marist before?
No, in fact, on ESPN, it's just spelled as Miss T. And,
right.
It's like, what is Miss T?
Right.
Who is that?
They are...
Is that a women's team?
No.
I don't know.
They're the Red Foxes from the Metro Atlantic Athletic Conference.
That's not a real thing. That's not... It's fake.
As bad as that is, they're 4-12 in that conference.
Wow.
Playing that play. Do you know, was it a close game for Vandy, do you think? Or...
surely it must have been.
Vandy lost 50-33.
50-33 is like a middle school score.
Right.
Back when I was playing for Coach Mose, like that's the kind of scores that we had.
Vandy has only been able to score over 40 4 times this entire season.
That's not good.
They're probably the worst of the worst right now. So don't expect a whole lot out of Vandy. Once you get to the bracket, if they're not there now, you know why. I don't know. What do you see coming out of this?
You got some of the usual suspects. I'll be watching Ole Miss,
Definitely.
see if they can keep it up. I think that'll be interesting. I think it'll also be interesting to watch what Alabama's doing this year. They're 0-1 in conference, 8-6 overall. They've had a couple of good years, decent years recently under Anthony Grant. People thought he was going to be a really good coach, but it seems like they've kind of slid back some this year.
They're really struggling, and it seems to be happening all in the second halves. They're holding opponents to 25 points in the first half, but averaging another 45 or 50 points in the second half. So, really kind of that defense is not holding tight for the second half.
But, I think he still gets some time to turn it around.
He should.
People aren't complaining because the Alabama basketball program's not doing that well.
Right.
So.
He's had some good cloud cover for that.
I think.
Who do you think, right now, real quick before we leave, who's the one team on here that you could see being crowned national champions at the end of the year? Is there a team?
I'd say the two teams I could see Missouri and Florida. I mean, Florida
Right.
just because Billy Donovan's got the experience, he knows how to get there.
They've got some pretty good players.
And Missouri, they're a top-notch team as well. But everyone else, no way.
No.
Not for Kentucky this
I
year.
would have to say Florida probably. Missouri runs too crazy a style. It doesn't really work in March.
Yeah, so we'll see. That's all the time we got. Just flies by here on Outputting our coverage.
Only 3 breaks today.
3 breaks. We will be back talking about other ramblings. College football always gives us some news to talk about. We'll be back at some point in the near future on Outputting our coverage.